We have Hina Rbani, who was a female minister of foreign affairs in Pakistan, very interesting position, and who is now a member of parliament. And last not least, we have Congressman Jason Crow, who was serving as a US Ranger 2 times in Afghanistan, and who is now very engaged in the future of the country, and interesting to hear also your perspective from the American side. So what we see currently, and what makes this session especially interesting, is a power struggle in the Taliban leadership. So Fawzia, is this a moment where you see momentum for a change for Afghanistan, for the democratic movement? You will have a session, like a congress in Vienna next week where you will meet. Is this momentum for Afghanistan?
Thank you, Katrine. It's a pleasure to share the panel with the distinguished panelists. And I'm glad that the Munich Security Conference have a spotlight on Afghanistan, because with the competing agendas, we always get this feedback that Afghanistan probably has fallen from the radar, which in reality, the situation has only gotten worse day by day for the people. So Afghanistan not being in the spotlight or in the headlines does not mean that the situation has improved. On the contrary, every day it gets worse for the people. When it comes to the power struggle, I think one of the characteristics of the Taliban was that they're a united force. Yeah. Their existence was based on the unity that they have demonstrated throughout their existence since 30 years. Lately, we see that there are divisions. I don't think these are ideological divisions. I think these are the divisions, and the fragmentation is rather over power. It's between Kabul and Kandahar, between the hardliners, so to say. But I feel this is a power struggle. And I think the more international pressure is exerted, especially the recent decision by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which requested arrest warrant of the 2 Taliban leaders, I could clearly see that division and fragmentation is amplified. And in fact, Kabul really looked like a military city in that day, as well as Kandahar. Each side was trying to strengthen the position. So a possible scenario, if this division continue, is that there will be further and further division by the leader making his position, the Taliban leader making his position even harsher. I don't know what is left.
How can it be harsher? It's already very harsh.
I actually wanted to come to that. When it comes to suppressing women and edicts to suppress people, nothing left to make it even harder and harsher. But I think he will be harsh on his own cabinet and his own government officials in terms of not allowing them to publicly have a statement against his edicts. And in Kabul, I think the reaction would be probably even further opposing him. So that will lead to an opportunity, as you mentioned, for a possible political process, because this is the prospect that we were hoping to happen in Doha. But the way the Doha process was managed, the way the negotiation was managed, did not lead us, especially the withdrawal, it did not lead us to a political settlement. It actually, on the contrary, led to handing over Afghanistan to Taliban. And the Taliban said they are changed, Taliban 2.0. But since they have returned to power, they have made Afghanistan a hell on earth for women and for everybody. And I think the more the world just sees them as a reality, the only reality, not the rest of the society, it will only embolden them. Because since 2021, Catherine, there has been more than hundreds of engagement with the Taliban.
That's very interesting.
I want to know from all of those who engaged what the outcome of this engagement was in terms of supporting changing the lives of people.
Let's bring in the regional perspective. Pakistan has been a supporter of parts of the Taliban. And if I see the situation right now, even Pakistan starts to criticizing and to seeing the Taliban as a threat for the security of the region. Can you tell us your perspective?
Okay, first of all, I think Pakistan is a country which has a 2,700-kilometer border with Afghanistan. Pakistan is a country which has lived through the impact and the effect of not only one experiment or, whatever you want to call it in Afghanistan, but twice. And we were in some ways, given our strategic location, as we call it, which has not really gone in our favor many times. The first experiment required a lot of mujahideen to be trained with a lot of foreign funds which are coming from Western countries, which put in extremism into the souls, minds, hearts of people on both sides of the border. And we had to deal with the consequences as the world exited. Guess what? The world exited again, a hurried exit, 2021, and we have to again deal with the consequences. So I think that's the reality. And I think the historical perspective in terms of what happened in those 21 years of engagement in Afghanistan, and what the results of that was, it was $2.3 trillion, 38 million people displaced, and 243,000 people, 67,000 of them in my country, died as a consequence of that. And we did not see an end to extremism or a lessening of suicide bomb attacks or any of those consequences. In fact, we saw an escalation in malnutrition. 2001 to 2021, we saw an escalation in poverty. We also saw, of course, women going to schools, and then the 2020 handover in some ways to the Islamic Emirates basically put everything up in the air, and whatever came out of it came because interests changed. That's the reality, right? So now where we are, I am a diplomat. I have been in and out of this job, almost 15 years now. There is a reality of 43 million Afghans who are living on Afghan soil. So when you say disengage completely, isolate, to what purpose? In diplomacy, typically, even your worst enemies, your worst, nemesis, people who you do not agree with at all, you have to try and engineer a change. You have to try and cultivate a change. You have to try and encourage a change. And yes, we are all very, very desperate right now, and we all have our hand up.
What makes you so desperate and critical? How do you see the actual situation?
Look, as I said, we had 700,000 people coming in 2021 inside Pakistan to take care of. We have a lot of people in Pakistan to take care of ourselves. Now, with that, that's not the story only. With the ammunition and the weapons and the sophisticated gadgetry that was left, TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which happens to be like the red line and the entity or the organization which has been very costly to us in terms of lives, has been able to kill with impunity. And that is obviously something that every country would like to put its security stability before anything else. However, we also have to understand that the regional security stability, when you have these borders, it permeates through the borders and comes into each other's countries. So what we try to do is to really build a coalition of the willing, so to speak, within the region, with Uzbekistan, with China, India also perhaps interested. Anyone who's an immediate neighbor has the most interest, with Iran for sure, to try and bring home the point that if this level of insecurity is felt within the neighboring countries, because as the UN reports repeatedly say, I think when it comes to internal security, things are very different. But when it comes to the security that the neighbors are feeling, things are, again, very different. I don't think any country has the vantage point to be able to dictate to the Afghans as to how they live and what they do at all. And the thing that you want to do is, as my very esteemed colleague mentioned, there was a commitment given to the world, to the Peace Committee, about commitment to girls' education, for instance, commitment to, whatever anyone made of 2.0. I was one of the first people who said, when everybody started saying, oh, they are now going to, I've said, let's wait for things to change before we start celebrating change, right? We are where we are. The reality is what it is. So sometimes you want the world to, you can wish the world to be what it is, but the world is what it is. And you have to engage, deal with the world as it is, to be able to effect the change that you want. Disengagement has never led to any answers.
But
for the
what
people
does
who are still stuck there.
mean? What does engagement from Pakistan's perspective mean?
I mean, look, there is many forms of engagement. There is a bilateral engagement. For the bilateral engagement, of course, we have lots of questions on the security side, which I have already alluded to. We have also lots of questions on how they manage for instance, if you use the name of Islam and decide that Muslim girls should not go to school, that has an impact on us, right? But as an Eastern country, we like to do most of our diplomacy behind closed doors, and we do not believe that diplomacy, which is on stages in Munich, has a lot of impact because it does the opposite of what diplomacy is supposed to do, which is engineer change. So we do all of those conversations, behind closed doors. I happen to be, I think, the first official woman minister to land in, so to speak, Taliban land, right? And that wasn't to, that was to give some very, very strong advice and some strong, but talking about it publicly, I think, goes against the essence of why we go there, why you engage, because you engage to try and create some change.
Okay, Fawzia doesn't seem to be of the same opinion. So the question is, what do you, as a opposition leader, of a women movements leader, expect from the outside world? You are living in exile, so what is the perspective of your movement?
Well, I think, Catherine, the situation is in a way in Afghanistan that Taliban are a product of the region by the global north money, the money that was sent to Afghanistan to defeat the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was defeated, but also that money was used to create and empower radicalization in the region. And now neither the region nor the global north knows how to manage the situation. It's a devil that's out of control. I think the regular narrative that the global north has is that as long as Afghanistan doesn't pose a real time security challenge for your borders, you're not going to have a strategic perspective beyond humanitarian aid to change the status quo. And you think that there is no real threat, while on the contrary, I believe that, and we all remember before 2001, when we were warning the world that, you are going to face the consequence of what we are experiencing. And this 2001 11 September attack happened. So again, it's a matter of clock ticking before an explosion happened, because the expectation that Taliban are there to protect the global security, it's a wrong expectation, because Taliban are a challenge for the global security. And then the region expectation is basically the relationship is shaped based on three narratives. Economic, which is mainly trade, and on that Taliban have most economic relations with Iran and Pakistan, and also Uzbekistan and other Central Asian countries, and China, definitely. It's based on security, counter-terrorism, and counter-narcotics. Security, there are still 23 to 25 military extremist groups that operate in Afghanistan that could be threat. TTP is just one. We were, for many years, we were, asking Pakistan, our dear country, Iran, and other countries not to provide sanctuary to the Taliban leaders and to their fighters, because we know some of their leaders lived in Pakistan, because this might come to you, the flame will come to you, and it's happening now. I feel sorry for those people who lose lives in Pakistan because of this, but it's a reality that TTP has, based on Pakistan claim sanctuary in Afghanistan. The same with other movements from military extremist movements from Central Asia. And Taliban are using this as a leverage point for their relationship. So it's not a strategic alignment. It's basically a tactic from the region. And how long they can keep the tactic is another issue. So that's why, I think we have to really have a strategic view, rather a political perspective, without changing the political circumstances and the political ecosystem. The efforts to fix Taliban and not fix Afghanistan is a failed effort. How long are we going to fix Taliban? And we were told that Taliban have changed. They will be fixed. Let's engage with them. We can probably bring some Muslim women, some Muslim men, others. They will change. Now, my plea to the Muslim world is,
why to the Muslim world? Initially, not to the whole world. Initially
to the Muslim world, because I see my sister coming from a Muslim country where they had a female foreign minister, a female prime minister, and also female speaker of parliament, where women do not face the same issue as they face in Afghanistan, is the Taliban are creating more Islamophobia than anybody else. So we must stop them. because they have a wrong perspective of Islam. I think pressure is the only, for now, the only answer. And eventually, you need to give space for political opposition to breathe and survive and create an alternative for Afghanistan. Everyone talks about political opposition, democracy, women's rights, but even for us as women movement, to have that space to strategize our efforts, it's not easy, Catherine. So I think the region should engage with all sides, so should the global north, because the global north has an international obligation. We need to make sure that the voices of voiceless people are heard. We need to make sure that people trust the system, the international rule and order. We need to look beyond humanitarian aid. I feel heartened when I see that I represent a country which is rich in nature. And Jason, you have been there. You served twice, right? Or at least served once and visited the other time. And Rbani, it's a country, and you have been to Afghanistan. Most of people in this room have been to Afghanistan. It's not only that it's a beautiful country, young nation. It is also a rich country, billions of dollars underground in terms of the natural resources. But it makes me, it makes my heart melt when I see that my people beg on the streets for humanitarian aid, which is not even sustainable, right? And for women to queue as beggars, and it's allowed to be a woman beggar in Afghanistan, but it's not allowed to work as women, to have a dignified job. And I think it's a moral conscious failure of the world if we just forget Afghanistan and we think that it's not in our border. It is going to come to our border. Just 4 days ago, Security Council had a meeting assessing the security risks from Afghanistan, and then identified Daesh, which is inspired by Taliban's victory, as a potential risk. So therefore, I think we need to look beyond humanitarian aid and beyond day-to-day business. We need to prepare ourselves for post-Taliban, because post-Taliban is coming. It's unpredictable. Post-Taliban will be with the Taliban. The elements of Taliban that believe in coexistence, we want to include them, but with women, with the rest of transformed Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is a transformed country. It has transformed, at least in the last 20 years. I come from a village. I'm a mountain girl. When I went to my village, people would ask me, who is going to be next president of United States? Is it going to be President Obama or Hillary Clinton? These are the village women. Mm-hmm. These are the transformed women. So we need to listen to that transformed people of Afghanistan and help them. I'm not saying you come and sign another national unity government agreement for us. No. I'm just saying that give us the space so we can have our own narrative, lead our narrative, together with some elements of Taliban. I'm not completely against engagement with, I'm advocating for a principled engagement, an engagement that there is a result at the end of this. And that will happen only when we have a strategic perspective of a political process.
So we have one more minute. Briefly, what is your perspective for the near future? So what will we see happening in Afghanistan? I
think there will be more division among Taliban, which will give us the leverage, but we need to prepare ourselves. The political opposition, the civic movement need to prepare ourselves. But on the question of what should the world do, Catherine, in 2001, when the world decided to go to Afghanistan, they never asked anybody from Afghanistan, what should we do? They went because their interest was at stake. So they will decide when their interest is at stake. And women and human rights is never a matter of interest for international decision-making and strategies. Also, education is not, Jason, not the only issue. Suppose if tomorrow they allow girls to go to madrasas, which are the religious school, we have a generation of women Taliban. Is it going to help Taliban, Afghanistan? So yes, education, but quality education, and education that actually helps Afghanistan, and a secular education we want, an education that was before. With that, I would like to thank you, and I think if you do not stand with people of Afghanistan, tomorrow you are going to face the consequence.
Thank you very much to all of you for this very fascinating insight in a moment where Afghanistan is at a moment maybe of change. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for your questions. Thank you.